Well, hey, I want to thank you for checking out this video. And I'm here with a team member and dear friend. This is Ed Thomas. So, Ed, thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Chris.
And yeah, well, hey, we obviously have a lot that's going on, and we have a lot that we would like to unpack.
Well, um, I was born in a town maybe 12 miles south of Philadelphia, Chester, Pennsylvania. Was born and grew up, and we moved to, my father was a steel worker, and we moved to Delaware when I was 10 years old. But during that time, there was some traumatic things that happened during the time I was growing up. In 1963, I remember very clearly when John Kennedy was shot and killed. Um, I believe I was in like fifth grade and remembered that. I remembered in 1968 going into junior high school, into senior high school, when Dr. King was assassinated, and I remember the riots and the things that were going on. And I did not know a whole lot about Dr. King. I was a young man uh, then, but as I grew older, uh, I began to read and to understand the impact that he played. I remember Robert Kennedy. I remember the night that he uh, won the primary in California and was murdered, as he was leaving. All of those things happened as I was growing up. Chester was a predominantly African American town, and so when we moved to Delaware, I had a culture shock because in my elementary years it was a integrated school, and so there was a new thing for me to grow up in that atmosphere. But I became comfortable, and I didn't really realize about racism until I was well into my teens. Um, I think I was like 13 maybe that I realized that I was kind of different and treated a little differently than my classmates were, you know. And from that on, that time, because my parents were not educated as far as degrees and things of that sort, they grew up in Georgia, and they migrated from Georgia to Pennsylvania because that's where the work was. And of course, my dad took care of us, and I grew up with a mom and a dad, an older sister and a younger brother. So I grew up in a stable Christian family, and from that point on, I grew up, and I didn't, we lived in an area where we grew up around my other African American friends, but we went to school with our white friends. I played football with my friends, and so I didn't know anything about this, and um, but I still remember the impact those events had in me. But I was always taught to love everybody, to treat everybody like I wanted to be treated. That's the one thing my parents uh, taught me, and I've been fortunate enough to get degrees and things of that sort. But I will contend today that my parents were smarter than I am.
Wow. Well, that's an awesome
I will
testament.
never
Yeah.
be smarter than they were. You know, I had aunts and uncles that had, 12 children, were able to feed them and clothe them with no education. So I came
12
from,
children and still had their sanity.
and they had
Yeah,
this.
okay.
Well, I don't know about that. I had five, and I'm a little crazy. So
Now, and so how old were you when because you became a minister? So
yes.
tell us a little bit about that journey and what your ministries looked like over the years.
Sure. I started. My parents were staunch missionary Baptist church. I grew up in Shiloh Baptist Church. Um, I joined the church and joined what they call the BTU, the Baptist Training Union. Um, but when we moved to Delaware, and I'm not going to tell you why, but I started going to this little church.
Oh, you have to tell the story.
You want me to tell
Yeah,
the
you have to
story?
tell the story. It's awesome.
Okay, okay. Well, I was about 10, 12 years old, and we moved to a newer neighborhood, and a girl caught my eye.
10 years old.
Yeah, 10
Awesome.
years old. So I
You're
was,
ahead of the game.
yeah, yeah. So I figured in my young mind that if I'm going to get to know her, maybe I should go to Sunday school with her. And so she had a family of like 6 other siblings, and I would jump in the station wagon with them, and I'd go off to this little church, this little Methodist church in a little town called Twin Oaks, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And from then on, I remember the pastor vividly. His name was Reverend Joseph A. Hayes. And of course, the girl and I, that kind of puppy love kind of wore off. But Reverend Hayes captivated me because he was so down to earth, and he made the Bible come to life, and I could understand it, and I understand who Jesus was, and I understood those. Yes, I did things that I wasn't proud of. I still did the teenage things. I dabbled into things that I wasn't supposed to, but I always wound up back at that little church. It's named St. Matthew's Church.
Wow.
And had about maybe 50 members. Never, it was a small church. I remember the potbelly stove right in the middle of it.
Oh wow, so it was old school.
Old school. Old
So
school.
you went looking for a girl, but you came out looking with, or you came out receiving a calling and a purpose.
I
And
found something
Jesus.
much better
Wow.
than the girl.
So God pretty much ruined your life at that point,
This
because
is
then you end up calling you into the ministry,
This is
right?
true. This is true. And that was strange because I never expected this, never wanted it, And I'm saying, I would ask God, me, I'm not smart enough. I'm barely I'm struggling to be a C student. Preachers are supposed to be smart. And I'm not eloquent, and I can't talk like other preachers, like my pastor did. I can't do this. But God said, yeah, and He wouldn't leave me alone. And I wound up accepting my calling. And in the CME Church, in the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, you have to go through different teachings, have to go to school. And that's where I started my journey.
And what year was that?
That was 1974 when I was licensed to preach.
Okay, so you had bell bottoms when you started preaching.
Absolutely. And platform shoes.
Awesome.
Oh, I was
Do
a
you still
sight.
have them?
I was a sight. No, I would not. I was a sight. I even had a little afro.
Awesome.
Believe that, folks. I did.
So you've been in professional ministry for over 40 years.
Over 41 August. I was ordained in 1979 and received my first appointment that same year. And this August will be 41 years in ministry. And I've traveled from Delaware to New Jersey, to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to Springfield, Massachusetts.
Okay.
We went down and we adopted 3 children while I was in Springfield. We moved to the south, to Birmingham, Alabama, from Alabama to Mississippi. And from there, I think I'm losing my track here, to Mississippi, to Lake Charles, Louisiana. From Lake Charles, we moved to the Carolinas, served in both Carolinas. And finally, in 2014, we were appointed here in a place called Lufkin, Texas.
Wow.
Wherever that was.
Yeah. Which is here now.
Which is here.
Now, and so then throughout your journey too, around that same time, you also went back and did more education to become a chaplain.
Yes, absolutely. When I served in, I think it was Winston-Salem, that was around 2012. A friend of mine introduced me and asked me to try out taking this thing called clinical pastoral education. And he said it'll make you learn a whole lot about yourself, And I had no inklings about becoming a chaplain.